My name is Michael, and I will tell you my story that happened to me 10 years ago. I was 32 years old, and in September my grandfather passed away. He was a very smart and responsible man. For several years, he lived far outside the city, in his own house. I was the only one who visited him every week. I loved my grandfather so much. He taught me everything I know and gave me more experience than my parents did. But unfortunately, none of us can live forever, and he passed away. It's sad, but he taught me not to worry about those who died. He taught me to care about those who are still alive. My grandfather lived a long life. He was a decent man, a good father, and good grandfather. He died like a real man, not afraid of death. He just fell asleep. Of course, he left his house to me. He knew I would take care of it, and if I sold it, the money would go to something necessary. Naturally, I wasn't going to sell it, but I didn't feel like going there for the first year either. There were too many memories. For a whole year, I didn't go to that house, but I knew I had to. And then the moment came. I packed my things, took some tools, and drove to my grandfather's house. It was located 20 miles outside the city, with only about 10 or 15 houses nearby. When I arrived, I immediately noticed that the old gate was open. I didn't remember if I had closed it a year ago. I didn't give it much thought and went inside. It was noon, but there was no electricity in the house, so I had to use a flashlight. I went into the living room and decided to start by cleaning up. I packed all my grandfather's belongings in the box and loaded them into my minivan. Then I started washing the floors and wiping off the dust. I wanted to set the house in order, fix everything that was broken, and come here on weekends. I cleaned all day until it got dark. The light from the windows no longer illuminated the house, and I decided to come back in a couple of days. Before leaving, I was walking through the dark hallway and accidentally stumbled. I leaned on the light switch and was very surprised. The house had electricity. Very strange, because I clearly remember turning off the breaker. Probably I just forgot. I left the house and drove away. The next day I brought some food with me and decided to stay the night. I went inside and started unpacking my things. Then I went to chop wood to light the fireplace. I went to the shed to get the axe, but it wasn't there. The axe was lying near the firewood, and I was very surprised that it hadn't rusted. I chopped some wood and got back to work. There were still many things to throw out and clean up. I worked until evening, and for about 6 hours I kept hearing some creaking in the attic. In an old house there are always strange noises, and at night they can even be scary. But I used to spend the night at my grandfather's and was used to them, or so I thought, because back then my grandfather was with me. Now I had to sleep alone. It got dark outside, and I lit the fireplace. It immediately filled the house with warmth and coziness. I decided to cook myself some lamb stew and strong tea. My grandfather always drank tea. I guess I inherited that. I made my dinner, turned on the TV, and started eating. At that moment, I heard a sound in the attic. Something fell. But I was very tired and didn't feel like finding the ladder and climbing into the dusty attic. I finished eating and went to bed. I couldn't fall asleep for a long time, even thought I was tired. Without light, the bedroom seemed creepy to me. I kept hearing noises in the attic, metal sounds, falling objects, and creaking boards. My imagination ran wild, and I felt like a child again, believing in ghosts. It was hard to sleep. All I could think about was Who was making those sounds? I figured it was either a wild animal or just damn birds, but it was incredibly scary to be alone in the silence and darkness. At 1 in the morning, I finally fell asleep and woke up at 9 a.m. I was very cold and I decided to warm up in the car. I didn't feel like lighting the fireplace. On the third day, I decided to clean up the yard, but first I had to check the attic. I found a ladder and climbed up. It was much cleaner than I expected, but I didn't find any wild animals. I went to mow the lawn, and at that moment I saw an old man. He looked very disheveled. Most likely he's drunk a lot of alcohol, his clothes were torn, and his hands had cuts and bruises. He walked past my house and at some point looked me straight in the eyes. It felt like he recognized me. I kept cutting the grass, and an hour later I saw the man again. He was walking toward me. The stranger came up to me and asked if I lived in this house. I said yes. He smelled strongly of cigarettes, alcohol, and urine. He told me to leave and not live here. He said very bad things had happened in this house and I shouldn't stay. I realized the man wasn't quite sane and asked him to leave. Before leaving, he cursed at me and said he had warned me. That evening, I decided to spend the night in the house again, but I didn't have any food. I locked the front door and drove to the nearest gas station. I bought myself a sandwich and a hot dog and drove back. When I returned, I noticed that the door to the house was open. I turned on the light and called out loudly, "Who is there?" No answer. I checked the whole house but didn't find anyone. Maybe I hadn't fully turned the key when I left. That was the only thing I thought of then. I ate and went to bed. This time there were no sounds in the attic and I fell asleep peacefully. In the middle of the night I heard the front door open. I got up and turned on the light. Who is there? No answer. I took the poker and went into the hallway. The door was open. I went outside but didn't see anyone. I immediately thought it was the strange man. Who else in their right mind would come visit at night? I closed the door and went back to bed. On the fourth day, I had to go to the office for work. But the next day I returned to the house to finish everything. I needed to fix the shower and I met that man again. I asked him not to come to my house at night or I would call the police. But the man said he didn't know what I was talking about. Before leaving, he gave me a stern look and said, "I warned you." That phrase gave me a feeling of anxiety. I don't know why, but I believed he wasn't the one coming to me at night. I couldn't leave because my parents were staying at my apartment. I had to stay another night. In the evening, I lit the fireplace and went to bed. I heard banging and strange sound in the attic again, but this time I was truly scared. Someone was walking in the attic. I realized it was night and the nearest place I could go was the gas station. No one would come to help me in time. I took the poker and slowly went to the attic. There was a ladder standing there, which I hadn't put there. I heard coughing behind the door. My grandfather used to cough like that. I felt chills down my spine and froze. My imagination pictured all sorts of scary and mythical things, and I just couldn't open the door. I took a step, and the floor creaked under me. I heard the sound of a bottle breaking and approaching footsteps. I ran out of the house, got in the car, and drove away. You can call me a coward, but it's better to be a coward and stay alive. The next day I came back with the sheriff and he inspected the house. Apparently someone had moved into my house after my grandfather's death. I told the sheriff about the suspicious man who had come to me. The sheriff questioned him. The man claimed something terrible had happened in the house and no one should live there. The sheriff didn't believe him and promised to come back again. Unfortunately, I never stayed in the house overnight again. After the incident, all the noises stopped and the police never found whoever was living in my attic. Was it him who used the axe? Was it him who turned on the light and opened the door? What would he have done if I hadn't left? I never know the answer to that question, but I have a feeling my grandfather was hiding something from me. In 2022, I turned 22. A week after my birthday, my parents bought themselves a new house. They let me stay and live in the old house, which is located just outside the city. I thought I would feel lonely, but I had a girlfriend who lived in the city. I immediately suggested she move in with me, but she refused. She was studying in the college, and if she moved, it would be inconvenient for her to commute so far to her classes. On the last day of summer, I invited her to my place. We spent almost all day talking and having fun. For dinner, Sarah suggested making pizza using an Italian recipe. I happened to have all the ingredients in my fridge. We turned on loud music and started cooking. After 2 hours, it was already dark outside. Our pizza turned out tasty, but Italians probably wouldn't eat it. Sarah had to go home. I went outside to get some fresh air while Sarah was gathering her things. Outside it was very dark, and only the porch light gave off a little light. I took out my phone, and I saw several missed calls from my mom. It was already late, and I decided to call her back in the morning. 10 minutes later Sarah came out, and of course I decided to walk her to the bus stop. I knew there were a few houses around, and all the neighbors were already asleep. It wasn't safe for a girl to walk alone in a place like this. The bus stop was 2 miles away from my house, and we needed to hurry. I always walk Sarah to the stop, and this time was no exception. Before leaving, I always leave the lights on in the house. Even though I am a man, I am still a little afraid of the dark. The light calmed me, and on the way back my house always looked like a beacon. We left the house and walked along a narrow dirt road toward the highway. It was very dark outside. On both sides of the road was thick forest. We had now used our phone flashlights to light the way, but this card light only made our fears worse. Small animals made scary sounds that would frighten anyone on the road. But we were together and pretend we weren't afraid of the dark. However, I knew I would have to walk home alone. We tried to talk about different things to distract ourselves from bad thoughts. But suddenly, in the distance, a human figure appeared. A strange, skinny man was walking toward us. Sarah stopped. She was scared to keep going. In her head, she immediately thought this man could be drunk and dangerous. I told her it was just a man and we just needed to keep walking. But in fact, I also felt a threat coming from this person. Maybe the darkness and creepy forest made our imagination come up with things that weren't real. We just kept walking, hoping to quickly pass the man and forget about him. But the man came up to us and spoke. I saw that Sarah was very scared. There was a creepy scar on the man's face. He was wearing old torn clothes. He asked only one question.
Where does this road lead?
I explained that if he kept walking, he would reach a small village. I told him there were a few houses there. He didn't say where he was going, and I suggest he turn back and head to the highway. I thought he was lost. But the man didn't listen to me. His gaze was fixed on my chest. Then he just turned around and kept walking straight. I decided to do the same. Sarah was shocked and kept talking about that strange man all the way to the bus stop. I was just glad we were almost there, but I kept thinking about how I'd have to walk back home alone. I said goodbye to Sarah and walked back. I walked faster than usual, probably 3 times as fast. Every sound from the forest made me walk even faster and gave me strength. I felt intense psychological tension, and that man stayed on my mind. I just wanted to get home as fast as possible and not meet him again. Soon, I saw a light in the distance. My house, a beacon in darkness. I didn't feel safe until I reached the door. At that moment, I thought, we will never walk this road so late again. You can call me a coward, but everyone has their fears. I opened the door, but my feeling of unease returned. The hallway light was off. I clearly remembered leaving it on. A lot of thoughts ran through my head, but I decided to act reasonably. I went to the switch and turned on the light. Probably I just forgot to leave it on when I left. I locked the door and went straight to the living room. I was very tired and wanted to sleep, but I left the hallway light on. I turned on the TV and lay down on the couch. Usually I fall asleep easily watching some show. After 15 minutes, I was already asleep. I woke up to a strange noise. It was 3 a.m. A minute later, I realized the house was too dark. Only the light from the TV lit up the living room. Without getting up, I slowly turned my head toward the hallway. The light was off. My heart started beating twice as fast, and panic gripped me. I was almost certain I wasn't alone in the house. I kept lying on the couch, staring into the darkness. I was too scared to stand up and go there. Darkness took over me again. Then I remembered I had heard the crash. The noise had come from the kitchen. My phone was on the other side of the room, and I couldn't grab it silently. There were still many hours left until morning, and I realized I needed to find out what the noise was. I hoped my phobia was once again making me paranoid. I listened to the silence for a few more minutes. Then I slowly stood up and picked up a pair of scissors from the table. I realized I couldn't quietly call the police, so I decided to defend myself. I slowly went to the switch and turned on the hallway light. If someone was in the house, they had definitely heard me by now. I shouted loudly, "Who is there?" I gathered my courage, opened the kitchen door, turned on the light, and calmed down. There was no one in the kitchen. I never figured out what made that noise. Then I checked all the other rooms. No one there either. I left the light on and went to the bedroom. In the morning, I woke up in a good mood and went downstairs. The light was still on. First thing, I called Sarah and asked how she was. Then I remembered my mom had called me. I called her back and she told me she had wanted to warn me. A week ago, a patient has escaped from the psychiatric hospital. The police were looking for him, and according to the latest reports, he was walking along the highway toward our village. I asked my mom what the man looked like. She said he had a scar on his face. I froze and didn't know what to say. I remembered his crazy look and felt uneasy. I went to the hallway to turn off the light and noticed the front door was open. At that moment, I realized that during the night he had been inside the house, and when I opened the kitchen door, he was hidden right behind it. I don't know what would happen if I had found him, but now I always checked the whole house before going to bed. Hi, I'm Michael. 10 years ago, I worked at an insurance company. Every day I called clients and offered them new terms of cooperation. Most of them probably hated me for calling at the most inconvenient moment. I stayed home to work. I just needed to call 30 clients and complete a few more tasks. I sat at my computer until the evening. I had one last call to make. I dialed the client's number and went to the kitchen to make some coffee. I had wireless headphones, so I didn't have to sit in front of the computer during the call. The client answered, and I asked his name to make sure it was him. Very often, a family member might pick up the phone. I asked, "Hello, is this Bob?" I didn't hear an answer, so I repeated, "Hello, is this Bob?" Someone was breathing into the phone, and after a few seconds replied,
Yes.
His voice was strange, tired, or even emotionless. Once I was sure I was talking to the right client, I started telling him about a new life insurance service. Usually at this point, the client would hang up or say they didn't need new service, but Bob listened silently to the end. I asked if he wanted to update his plan. He replied.
That's a very interesting offer.
Again, his response was cold and emotionless. "So, do you agree with the new offer?" Bob fell silent. I felt awkward and repeated the question. Bob hung up. Well, that was the hardest call of the day. I made myself some coffee and took off my headphones. I left the computer on and went to relax in the living room. I put on a YouTube video, I think it was about surviving in the woods, and fell asleep. I woke up at 11 p.m. and went to my bedroom. I noticed my computer was still on and walked over to turn it off, but I saw there were several missed call notifications. They were from Bob's number. I was surprised and decided I'd call him back in the morning. My workday was over. It was the first time a client who hung up on me called back. I forgot to turn off the computer again and went to bed. I fell asleep quickly. I had a bad dream. I don't remember exactly what, but it woke me up. I opened my eyes and lifted my head. The room was dark. Only the monitor gave off light. I got up, went to the kitchen, drank a glass of water, and returned to the room. I noticed more missed call notification on the monitor, again from Bob's number. I didn't understand why he was trying to call me for hours at night. I was about to turn off the computer when Bob called again. That was really strange. I wouldn't even call my friend this late, and he was a completely stranger. I decided to answer. I put on my headphones. "Hello, why are you calling me so late?" Silence. Someone was just breathing heavily into the phone. I asked again, "Why you are calling me?"
I need your help.
The man's voice was very emotionless and distant. I asked what happened. Bob sighed heavily a few times and hung up. I didn't understand anything and decided to call back, but nobody answered. A few minutes later, Bob called again.
I have no choice, Michael.
Bob said and went quiet. I stayed quiet too. It all started to feel like someone's stupid prank, or worse. I asked again, "What do you mean? What choice?" He didn't answer. Instead, I heard a strange sound, like someone slowly opening a door. "Bob?"
They're watching me.
He said quietly. A chill ran down my spine. I asked, "Who?" I felt like a character from a 911 call movie. He didn't answer, just breathing, steady, muffled. Then the call dropped. I tried calling back. No answer. A few minutes later, I shut down the computer, but I couldn't sleep. And half an hour later, I sat down at the desk again. I sat waiting for his call. I was sure Bob would call again, and he did. This time his voice was more agitated and he was clearly moving. I heard his footsteps, like in some big warehouse. Bob said someone was chasing him to kill him. I couldn't quite believe it and immediately asked why he was calling me and not 911. Bob said the police couldn't help him, then hung up again. I got a text from an unknown number. You'll pay for everything. I completely stopped believing this was real life and for a second thought I was dreaming. But it was real. Bob called again. I asked if he was playing some kind of prank on me. Bob just kept breathing into the phone like he didn't even know we were connected. Suddenly he said,
Michael, this is all because of you.
I asked what he meant.
Look out the window.
Bob said in a calm yet chilling voice. My eye twitched. I stood up. Without a doubt in my mind, I'd see Bob outside. The room was dark. I slowly walked to the window. I moved the blinds and looked out. Across the street, a man stood. He was wearing an old coat and a hood. What do you want? I asked nervously. In response, I only heard breathing. The man turned and walked around the corner of the building toward the entrance. I was tense and bad thoughts clouded my mind. Who had I crossed? What did he want from me? Bob kept breathing into his phone. I lost my temper and shouted aggressively that I was calling the police. No answer, so I hung up. I heard the elevator doors open in the building. I looked through the peephole and waited. But the elevator didn't stop on my floor. I locked my door with all 3 locks and started thinking what to do. I was being threatened and I had definitely seen him outside my home. Should I call the police? But they wouldn't find him. If they came too quickly, he'd just wait until they left and come back. All I could do was wait. A strong feeling of anxiety stayed with me for another 30 minutes. Another call. I asked again what he wanted from me. Bob replied that I shouldn't worry. Soon I wouldn't get any more calls from him. What does that mean? What are you planning, Bob? I'll never forget his final words.
Are you sure my name is Bob?
I tore off my headphones in horror and hung up. What the hell? Who was I talking to? I decided to look up Bob in our client database, and what I saw shocked me. Bob had died a year ago. He was 65 and died of a heart attack. I heard footsteps on the stairwell and knocked at the door. Horror and panic gripped me. I turned pale and my stomach tightened. I slowly, silently walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It was my neighbor. I opened the door. She asked why I was talking so loudly at night and asked me to keep it down. I apologized and closed the door. I went back to my computer and blocked Bob's number forever. Who had called me and what did he want? Who was that man outside? A random passerby or not? Now, the story stayed with me forever.